So when you've kind of got an idea of your structure, you have an idea of your actual CMS, the platform. Now we're talking about content, getting into that content, right? I'm gonna switch the poll here really quick because this whole issue of is your content management system and website is it still supported? That's actually a big deal. So I'm gonna launch a poll about that to see what people think. Content planning, of course, you definitely want to start with your current assets, right? We talked about that a little bit in the analytics, your pages, but you also want to look at beyond just your website pages, your print content, your blogs, graphics, photos, video, any premium content you offer. Many times people choose to update that as well. If they go and they're updating their website, say the website has a much bigger uh, branding change, but you have a lot of premium content or PDFs or something, or guides or something. If people go to download that, it looks completely different. You may want to update those as well. So you definitely want to gather that content and keep in mind what's high performing. And then keep in mind, really, if your goal of your site, it's not everyone's goal, but most people's goal is to attract people organically, meaning people are typing in Google, right, and finding you. So to attract people organically, content is really critical. It's super important. The biggest problem with content we tend to see is there's just not enough on a page. If you have 50 words, 100 words, or 200 words on a page, consider eliminating that or combining it with other content because that's a bit low. If your website is really large with lots of pages and they are all have very little content, you actually will get penalized. Google will actually send less people to you. So it's important to make sure your pages, if it's organic traffic and ranking in Google is important, you need, 500 to 1,000 words is kind of that spot you want to be in around there. We did have a quick question, just what is premium content? Premium content meaning stuff that's not on your website and stuff that you may have gated, right? You may have some type of um, resource or packet or PDF or something, or you may have like a webinar. So you have a webinar, like we would consider what you're watching now premium content on our website, right? You had to register to get the link to see this. So usually premium content is used to drive collecting information like donor information. So premium content could be maybe you produce a really nice case study every once in a while on the type of mission you're doing. Maybe have that behind an email so prospective donors or people, you can collect their information to get that. So this is a tool called Gather Content. It is very helpful too with your content organization when you get going and really dive into that content to have a tool. It's best to do that. Gather Content is a good one. It's not that expensive. Trello is a free one. We've used a lot. Trello to kind of organize content. You can check that out. And of course, just Google Docs. Hopefully, you're taking advantage of all the free Google stuff out there. Google for nonprofits too has a ton of free stuff. They have the Google Nonprofit Program, which gets you free tools and some low cost tools for stuff like email, calendar, document management, right? So you can use that. A thing you definitely want to do is sort of define and align your content with any changes you've had. If you had a change of mission, change of brand, new services, new leadership, whatever, realign your content and update it. Usually, it's very rare that content just comes over. And we do that sometimes. We export, import, we move content over. If it's the case that this redesign maybe has come pretty quickly after the last one, maybe it's only been a year or two, sometimes we'll just verbatim move content over. But usually you do want to review it. Make sure it's aligned with your personas, aligned with your goals, and make sure your premium content is updated to reflect whatever changes in your organization. One tool that's useful, we're not going to spend a lot of time on these because they will be included for you in the follow-up email, which you could download and take advantage of these worksheets if you want. A very useful one for each page in your website is a page brief worksheet. And you see right there at the top, we're talking about audience first communication, audience first design, right? Making sure your website aligns with the audience you want to talk to. So the page brief worksheet goes through that. hits SEO and value and action and some other things. So that's a useful tool if you want to use it. The next step is the wireframing and layout. And this is where you're really defining the structure of each page, not necessarily the overall site. That's the site map, but this is the page. And the wireframe is sort of a lo-fi skeleton. It has very little design in it. It's typically monochrome. It may be black and white, or this in the case of this one, it's bluish. But this is a fast iterative process where we're trying to prototype a page and figure out exactly where elements on the page should be, right? How are we going to drive people to be interested in that donate button or that volunteer button or scheduling a meeting or, looking at a resource or whatever. So you typically identify your key pages that need a unique layout, right? We're not going to wireframe every single page on your website. We won't do that, but we will take every unique layout and some key pages like contact, donation, whatever. We'll wireframe those unique pages and important pages, homepage, of course. And we did talk about content before this, right? And that's key. So the order of these items I'm going through is very important. Okay. Because the wireframe stage, people used to kind of do this first. They get excited, right, about what's the website going to look like. They didn't really have the content defined. So they may make a wireframe and there's just not enough space in the page for the content they want to put there. So we do that content stuff first. So when we get to wireframe, say we wireframe your homepage, we are putting in the actual text in the wireframe that will be on your webpage. So that makes sense so that we can balance out that design and text, make sure pages have the right amount of text and stuff. So these are just some examples, as we're wireframing out these sites, doing major chunks where content's going to go. So this was in a new home page. We wanted to integrate live chat. We wanted to know, where's that button going to go? We want to have these 3 panels on the home page, all these things, and they're major CTAs, which were find a workshop, right? So it was really nice to create these wireframes to plan all that out. And you definitely want to plan interactivity as well. And some of that will come into play during the wireframe stage. So you don't need to overdo it. So if you're, say, going to be integrating with a donation tool, a chat tool, you're going to be integrating with a pop-up tool, those, I wouldn't bother wireframing those. Those have fixed layouts. You can't usually change that stuff. So, but you do want to plan the interactivity at the stage, at least a little bit in the wireframe. And don't forget about mobile. Remember, mobile interactivity is very different. And Google now, too, just the latest update from Google, which was a major, major update for the search engine. They are actually putting a huge amount of emphasis now on a new item, which will change your ranking, how you rank. And that's what's called a cumulative layout shift. And that is the desktop version. How different is that mobile version? Is stuff moving all over the place? And is it going to be hard for people to go between desktop and mobile and understand how that works? So if mobile's super important to you, you definitely want to think about that in the wireframe stage as well. Interactivity here is an example of kind of and this was a custom thing. So this is a custom piece of interactivity that's very important for this client. So this was wireframed out. And their map and how you find different things and find workshops, very important as well. So even though the map portion of the tool is powered by Google Maps, this particular section, those pop-ups are actually custom programmed Google Map items we did. And this page is just so important that we wanted to nail the interactivity. So we decided to wireframe that. So once your wireframe is kind of done, then we're going to talk a little bit more about design and content. So once your wireframe is done, you're going to want to create more of an actual design, right? You're going to start adding in the colors, the graphics, images, all sorts of things like that. So the number one problem we've seen really with design is kind of over designing. Really, people are typically visiting your site for a service, to see your mission, to donate, to do something. They're really interested in the content, not necessarily write the design. They're not there for the design. So when it comes to the design, less is definitely more. And the audience first and thinking about your audience applies to this too. What colors and what imagery, what things do your audience resonate with? For instance, I love to use real photos. I hate to use stock photos. Many times when we do a redesign project, part of that project is like a few days of photos, just photo days, where we go and collect a ton of video and photo content. So that is available for the designers to make a very authentic feeling website that really speaks to their audience. So the visual design is part of the success of your website. So definitely don't, definitely don't skimp on that. And that's something too that's kind of a bummer with the Wix and Squarespace sites. There's some nice looking ones out there, but you're in kind of a sandbox. You're a bit boxed in, to what you can do. So color is very important too. This is something we're revisiting a lot actually with nonprofits as far as their accessibility. The number one thing we see with accessibility problems is actually not enough contrast. So that's a big problem, not having enough contrast. So you may have brand colors that are a little subdued, and that's fine. But then you're going to want to use those as accent colors. You do want to maintain a minimum level of contrast that accessibility standards kind of outline, which is the base contrast is 3:1. You want to have that throughout your site. The color can convey a lot of feelings, so keep that in mind. Again, I was talking about accessibility here. Here is a free tool, and all of these links to and tools I'm talking about will all be in the follow-up email. So you don't worry about having to write them down. That tool is the WebAIM is a great website to check all kinds of accessibility issues. But a very popular part in there is this tool for contrast. If you want to plug in your brand colors and see, can I use white text over this color? Can I use black text over this color? Can I use these two colors together? Will they have enough contrast to not cause accessibility issues? We got a quick question too. I'll just answer super quick. If we're scheduling any kind of analysis of websites after this webinar, yes, we actually do have that available. We have a very standardized kind of website redesign audit thing we have, which is a standard thing we do a lot. And all that information will be in that follow-up email. So you'll have the opportunity if you want to have someone look at your specific website. So typography is another big thing. Hopefully your brand guide, you have picked sort of a brand font. Usually brand guides have two. They typically will have a font for a headline, a font for body content is kind of typical. Definitely be picky about your fonts. You don't want 5, 10, 20 fonts. I mean, really, 2 is typically the norm, with sort of one maybe having a third variation. Maybe one is used all caps or bold, or there's some other type of variation. So choose the typography that you think complements your design, and use fonts in a hierarchy manner. So if you use a certain font for a headline, always do that. And then that will help people intuitively understand that's a headline, that's important. That's a headline, that's a subheadline. The way people read websites isn't like a book, they scan websites. So typography and making things easy to read can really help. Hopefully stick to actual web fonts. Stick to web fonts. The most common thing is people are using fonts from Google, or they're using fonts from Adobe, or another online kind of repository of web compatible fonts. And then those are actually loaded from those entities. So you don't have to worry about managing your own fonts. Imagery is the next thing. And I spoke a little bit about this, how it's awesome to have authentic, real images, to not use stock photography. Sometimes you have to, that's just the case. This is just a small section of a website. This is a client that works with housing, getting people their first-time home buyers, and for immigrants and minorities and stuff like that. That's their specialty, which is awesome. Great organization. And so we did photo days with them where we went to their workshops. We were able to show people on the website what it looks like to attend a class. And we did video work too. And then we did mix in a stock photo here too. It's not too bad to mix stock and other photos, maintain the same quality. Like if the stock photos look super good and you've been taking photos maybe with an old phone, it's going to look kind of strange. But use relatable images, original when possible. And another thing to keep in mind is with stock photos, you don't have to just use the stock photo as is. Many times we will crop it or do different things to the photo to make it a little bit more unique. So, people aren't seeing that same photo everywhere. So the imagery can be very powerful for your site, especially if it really speaks to the audience. Again, going back to that sort of audience first communication. A helpful tool that kind of brings all this together, right? It brings color, font, design, photos sometimes, is a style tile. these are collections of design elements, and it's really nice to have those for your designers as you're designing the website. Also, just for the future too, is doing new sections and having this style kind of set up. It helps a lot of other elements when you get into more of the nitty gritty design. So the next stage is really the mockups, and this is sort of a full fidelity, full color mockup with the real content, the real colors, the real fonts. And the idea of this stage is to take very important pages, homepage, maybe one or two other pages, and do a mock-up that will look exactly like the website will look. So this is kind of the final step before this gets handed off to people, to programmers, to maybe develop this into a WordPress site or a Wix site or whatever kind of site. And again, you'll be a little hamstrung in the design process if you don't choose an open source CMS where you can kind of do whatever you want. That's kind of a bummer. Sometimes people design something really cool, and then they go in to try to integrate it right into Squarespace, and Squarespace doesn't allow kind of what they want to do. So once your mockups are done and your site has been built and it's been programmed and you have a test site up there where you're developing stuff, you're going to be starting to put in that content and build those pages. You may have some imported, exported from the old site, right? That can happen. I'm going to look at this poll actually super quick. It looks like almost all of you, or a lot of you, 50% ish, are on a supported current CMS. Good job. That is good. That's very important. It does look like 55% you're either not on a supported CMS or you don't quite know. If you reach out to us after that follow-up email, that's something we could quickly tell you right away in like 5 seconds. By looking at your website, we can tell you if this is built with something that is still supported. I'm going to switch the poll up here quick as long as we're talking about content. So content, continually go back to refer to your strategy. If you've done that work, you've created the personas, the style and voice guide, all these awesome things. You've developed goals and you've developed an SEO plan, right? The worst thing is to have a really great plan and not look at it, and then go and just build content and forget about the plan. So having your website be consistent and consistent in tone and really speak to your audience well, refer back to that for sure. One thing too that is another tool you could use is we do have a SEO worksheet too. I showed you that page brief. That has a little bit of SEO in it, just enough to kind of keep in mind. But we also do have a worksheet for actual SEO on the page, which you get into the more nitty gritty. So that's where you're defining your title and your meta tags and other stuff, the purpose of the page. You're starting to list out your target keywords, things like that. This is useful for the content step. Sort of the SEO content is really content too. Like, what's the title of the page? That's what shows up in the Google search and shows up at the top of the browser. You want your very important keywords in the title, in the headings, in the content, in CTAs, in links. When you carefully kind of craft that, your website will be more effective at driving donations and other types of things and helping with your mission.